Shaun, thank you so much for joining us on the Sports Edit. It's good to chat about your career and obviously spending time in France with you. There's a lot of dynamic rugby, and it's good to see. But Shaun, I just want to start off with coaching and how are you finding being in the coaching world now?
It's 6 years now. Love it. It's like most jobs, very demanding. The trick is when you go from playing, which is physically extremely demanding, and when you move on to the other side, let's say coaching, it's the same sport, but it's not at all the same job. We're talking about the same subject, but the method and how you go about it is completely different. Playing is mainly physical, and coaching is nothing physical, and it's all preparation, info, and obviously the mental side. So I dare say it's harder, it's tougher. The hours are more demanding. And more than anything, when you play, you half in control or totally in control. When you coach, the players have the control, or the team has the control, and you kind of find yourself, I suppose, sometimes not so much on the outside, but you've got to pass the baton, so to speak. So that's a little bit different. Other than that, I'm passionate about rugby, obviously. The coaching side, teaching side of things is the main reason I do it, the learning side of things. So more than happy with that. And like I say, I'm in an interesting place, France, which opens other possibilities and other dynamics, as you said.
It's true, very, very true. And Club Biarritz, I'm sure you guys are anticipating a good season. How are you feeling about the upcoming one?
Yeah, we've done well. We've recruited well. Biarritz historically is a club that has had a lot of success, recent success. They've changed ownership over the last 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
And as a result, the club's had to change its model. Before, it had, I suppose, a bankroller, an owner who was willing to fund. And at that stage, they were right up there with the Stade Francais and the Toulouse and Clermont. Okay. And then when that ownership change came, because the model was such that they were dependent on a wealthy benefactor, they struggled 4 or 5 years. They've changed hands again in the last 2 years with the new model again, developing young players, developing a stadium, developing a city. So there's a really nice project. They've fallen away a little bit, and they've got some work to do in the next year or two to catch up to be anywhere near what they once were.
Oh, but that's how they've got you there.
I'm part of many others. There's a lot of work ahead because professional sport, football, I suppose, is the leader. Rugby follows suit. Everyone does a lot of work, a lot of hard work, but it's a financial thing too. It's driven by finance. And top 14 as an example, the Montpellier, the Stade Francais, they're clubs that put a lot of time and effort, but especially finance behind it to be able to to be competitive. So Biarritz are a little bit different. They want to develop from within, players from the region, and of course in the market, pick the right kind of players at the right time to be able to bridge that gap. So that's where we're at. So we've worked hard in the market and got some nice, interesting players, and hopefully 1 or 2 more before the year is finished. Yeah, so hopefully we're in a good place now with the second year of the same staff, in a position now to kick on.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And like we were chatting earlier before, Shaun, you've obviously had a bit of a unique approach to training now because of the time that you've had on your hands. Has it been when you've been able to sit down and look at the team as a whole, and then what direction you want to go from there?
Yes, there's that. Like I say, our season was cut short. We started, the staff came in beginning of last season. So there's always groundwork that you have to put in place. That's the same as anything. And because the club is dynamic, it's moving forward quite quickly. There are changes that happen all the time. So the COVID, as for many people, I'm sure many clubs all over the world, didn't come at a great time. But then it is what it is. And so we did a SWOT analysis, and we saw what was missing and what we could change. And the great thing was, it wasn't a month off season where you try and rush things. There was a lot of time to dig deep and to see how far you want to go with things and where we want to take it. So we did, as I suppose many coaching staffs and many clubs around the world did the same thing. lucky enough, like I said, with 3 or 4 recruitment guys recruited that hopefully will help us kick on a level. And then there's months of pre-season, there's months of work which was allowed through this COVID situation, which is great as well, because you then spend weeks and months working on something rather than month off season, everyone's tired, take a break, come back in, rush it 4 weeks, and then you get going. So I think that's been the positive. And I think not only here, everywhere we should see a higher level of skill, a higher level of physical performance individually, collectively, and of course then the analysis work or the technical work that goes into, I'm sure, individually, but also teams across the world would have improved that level. As we saw in the New Zealand version of the Super Rugby, the quality of rugby was superior across the board. And I'm sure we'll see that in South Africa, in France, everywhere in the world.
That's excellent. And obviously you played as number 8. So is that your involvement now in the club? Are you focusing purely on the scrum, or have they got you doing a few other things in and around there as well?
No, I'm forwards coach and defensive coach.
Okay.
And then those two things are often linked. We work in a duo. With the guy I work with, Nicola, is attack and back specific. I'd be defense forward specific. And then things like breakdown in the contact area often falls into the defensive responsibilities as well as the forward responsibilities. So we've got I suppose an attack and a defense mindset, if you want to we'll call it like that. And like I say, there's lots to do. We've got a few guys that help us out. Our club is transversal in the sense that through the academy into the pro side, we go back and forth. So we got coaches that are the academy coaches that assist us in certain areas. So we're developing that, not only developing players, but developing coaching staff as well.
Because how do you find the balance? I always find this interesting. You know, as a player, you're doing your thing and you always think, now why coach has done this and I want to do that now. Now you've got the opportunity to be a coach. So it's almost like you take your ideas of your playing plus what the coach has said to you and you sort of mix it together and go forward from there. Is that right to say that?
No, I think if you're careful to stick and pace and do a compromise of a half and half, I wouldn't know unless you've fallen on the right recipe.
Yeah.
I'm worried about that. I think what's important, that's my perspective anyway, playing experience is important because there's a feel for things and an understanding of things that you get through playing, especially if you played long. I overplayed, so definitely that part is true for me. And that's important to remember that because you are dealing with people and players ultimately. It cannot just be about what your mind thinks or the way that you would put something into place. You're dealing with individuals who most times are better placed than you to execute or to have a feel for things. So that I try and stay very much in touch with the playing side. How would I have taken that as a player? How would I have seen that if I put myself in a playing position? I think that's key. And while as a young coach, which I am, while you're still young, and maybe have that advantage, that's an important one, because very soon you go across, I suppose, the line where you're very much a coach or very much a manager, and then it's all theoretical or technical or on a paperboard or something like that. So I try and have that approach. You learn from everyone, hopefully, if you've been lucky enough to be coached by guys who were smart and shrewd. You learn things along the way, good and bad. So there's a bit there, and I would say the key to everything would be not what you've experienced or what you think. You have to be open enough and go and search broad at what are the methods of other people, not just technical things, but the methods, the way they go about their work. And in that, there will be learning and finding and I suppose, growth.
Yeah, that's so true. That's a brilliant summary there. But Shaun, you said you overplayed. What made you think you overplayed? Was it an injury that you got along the way, or?
No, it's the years. It's the years. Years. No. So, I suppose like everyone's journey is different, and I was fortunate enough. I spent a number of years in South Africa and then did 10 seasons in France, and had a good time. Was lucky enough to be at a very good, successful club at the time, which was Toulouse, and they had a rotation system where very rarely anyone would go 3 games in a row or 4 games in a row. So as you're getting older, that's kind of managed. That load's managed. And anyway, then I suppose then you add a year, and in the end, I suppose I did a year or 2 too many. Didn't get to finish my final year because of wear and tear. Like I say, had a great career, and I'm happy for a long career, but definitely overstayed my welcome. But then you learn other things. Then you learn other things from a coaching perspective, from a managing perspective, because you understand what it's like to be a player that's right at the end, that's heart still wants it, that head still wants it, but the body perhaps cannot respond like it once could. And that's inevitable for all rugby players. At some point, the two don't marry up anymore, and it's because I've gone through something like that. That's helpful at stages when certain players are at certain parts of their career where you can be understanding, where you can guide them, but also that you're a realist and you know that 34, 35, 36 doesn't allow everybody to be, I suppose, what you can be, and that's where youth and the dynamic approach obviously counts for a lot.
So true, very, very true. Because you also did some coaching with Jake White, and that must have added to your coaching credentials. You must have picked up a few things there and helped you to where you are now.
Absolutely, like I say, along the way, I played under Jake. You mentioning just as we got on. That under 21, under 23 period, that was Jake who was the coach. I was exposed to Jake early on in my career, professional career at least, at junior level, senior level, and then coached with him one of my first opportunities. So absolutely learned a lot about the game, of course, about management, about planning and organization. And like I say, those are things that, provided you see it for what it is, are fantastic opportunities. Sometimes things go very quickly. You've got to take stock and realize where you're at and who you're exposed to and try and retain as much of the info as you can, which I hope I did.
Yeah, I think you did, because I think you're
There's great experience. There's great experience there. There's great experience. There's great knowledge. Again, coming back to your question in the beginning, it's important how you mix it to your character, to your method or your approach. But there's no denying that there's a wealth of experience and expertise there.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of eyes are going to be on what happens as soon as the South African Curry Cup, whatever they want to call it now, gets going. Because, Jake's been doing some interesting work there, and it's going to be interesting because the Sharks have also been doing quite well. So there's been a lot of talk about those two sides and what happens there.
Yeah. And exactly. They're both, I suppose, both in a similar position because they would have lost a number of stalwarts, a bit of older, some of the older guard. Newish staff for the Sharks, certainly new staff for the Bulls coming in. So it's a transitional period, which is always interesting. And no doubt the Bulls will be successful. I'm almost certain there with Jake involved. And like I say, what the Sharks have shown in the early part of Super Rugby was exciting. Like the way they're going about it. And then, like I say, because it's an old team of mine, I really hope that they go well.
No, I'm sure they will, definitely. But we're talking about the sharing of information, and do you believe that's become an essential part of rugby because it tends to be developing or evolving quite quickly? So that sharing of information is important as coaches, isn't it?
I think so. Like I say, the context might not always allow you that. The COVID situation where everybody was in the same position, no one could work. There wasn't much to protect because it was your personal thought and you going through a process where you are looking to learn, where you're looking to improve. Once someone else is on that same wavelength, that's an easy exchange. When someone's full on into work, preparing a season or busy competing, it's not necessarily the same mindset as a coach who's taken a sabbatical and he's now looking for things. So the context is very important. But yes, I do believe it's important. I believe it's important to have relationships with people. It doesn't have to be as much as a mentor, but people that are experienced, that have strong points of view, that are willing to share. It's great for learning. And if that's the approach from the learning perspective, it's got to be the same approach from your side, because there's always someone who wants to know, who wants to ask, and it is a give and a take thing. And when you're there, information can be acquired through any means. So it's not because you're being secretive about it that someone cannot acquire it. That's quite easy to do in the modern world. I think what's important is that once that's shared, is that the key difference becomes then the methodology, how someone goes about his work with the information which is generally out there. You watch a few weekends of rugby, most of it is on view for you anyway. What's the difference is the method, the way people go about their work, the way they approach the game, and the way they go about their their art or their craft, whatever you want to call it, and then of course the way you manage situations that will come with your experience, with your individual ability.
Yeah, I was going to say they've all received the same information, but how they translate it is always interesting to see how different coaches have their philosophies and go about it. It's very, very interesting. Do you think it's something that perhaps, because I know you guys in Europe are sharing a lot of that information, is it something that South African coaches maybe need to consider, or are they doing it? I'm not so sure. Are they sharing enough information to grow the game?
I can't judge on that as I'm not in that context. What I can understand is that if you're competing against someone who's in the same context as you, then that sharing becomes a little bit harder. So that's easy. So I'll give you an example. That coaching group that we had, a lot of guys are in the Pro 14, a lot are in the top 14, some are international coaches. And when you're not in direct competition with someone, that becomes quite easy. So I'm sure, we're talking about Jake or anyone from the Sharks, they'd have their people they share with, but it wouldn't necessarily be the Bull sharing with the Sharks or the Lions with Province. That's maybe a little bit close to home. But that they do share and that they do have mentors or people that they exchange with, I'm almost certain that's the case.
Absolutely.
Like I say, if not very quickly, you become isolated in a bubble with one perspective, one viewpoint. And it may be successful, but it won't inevitably continue to be, because you have to be open to other things. And the more you're open to other things, the more you're in a learning phase. And like I say, and then there's no ceiling really.
No, that's true. That's very, very true. And obviously, just want to find out one thing, because I see it's quite interesting. The schoolboy rugby in South Africa is quite well known, and guys trying to push himself to make it professionally. Is there a sort of similar approach in France? They look at schoolboy rugby and try to get those guys to be as competitive at that level, or do they wait for a bit later on in years?
Well, I think the system is completely different. It's not a school system where rugby gets pushed. In France, you play rugby at a club.
Right.
So generally, school is for schooling, for educational purposes, and most of your sport, all your sport will get done at clubs. And because that's the case, often the development phase is pushed back a year or two. So like South African boys would come out of school 18-ish, hopefully, 18-ish, and they'd be ready to go. France would be more 19-20, where they'd be at a similar phase, because the educational side has been put forward, if that makes sense. So it's not entirely the same, but ultimately everyone works for the same thing. And then what they do this side is they put them into academies, clubs. They go to clubs to play. They get into an academy. The academy develops them, and eventually they get pushed through to the senior team. Like I say, which is not the South African way. South Africa has almost outsourced that. Old days of the club rugby is now school rugby, and so that development happens a little bit quicker in South Africa than it would in a place like France. And
do you think it bodes well for South Africa through that? And in saying that as well, you also look at the current French national side. They're in good stead at the moment. Does it bode well?
It's different systems. Like I say, there are bigger things involved in that. I'm a fan. I like the South African system. Like I say, university rugby, which is coming back to something of importance, where before maybe it wasn't for a while. Those kind of levels compensate for what has missed over the years, which is club rugby. So the European model is just a little bit different. The French model is that there is no school rugby, so you're going to focus on the club side of things. Club dominates university this side. And the South African model, like I say, there's a private institution, a school, or the schooling environment can take and develop a child, educational-wise, of course, but also sporting-wise. So once you're in a hostel or a res and that thing goes, there's no problem there. I think that's potentially a better system. They don't have it yet, so we're comparing apples and pears. It's not the same thing. My experience would be when a South African boy comes out of school at 18, he's a little bit closer, generally speaking, to someone being able to kick on than a French boy coming out of school at 18, because that process is delayed by 18 months. So sometimes the French national team does well, sometimes not. South African national team does well, sometimes not. Very lucky both countries that they have massive numbers, good players, lots of talent and massive numbers. So they always should be competitive. I don't think it's as simple as bringing it back to the schoolboy setup or the lack of schoolboy rugby in France. I don't think that's the reason, although in the development, those things are key. True.
Very, very true. Because it made me think about your career. You're obviously playing SA under 23, and obviously times have changed and I don't do that anymore. But it just seemed that you on a nice trend going forwards, but you decided, I'm going to spend my career in France. What was the sort of thinking behind it, and was it just that view of the nice French rugby?
No, it wasn't that, because, like I say, I had never been exposed to that. What it was is a curiosity or an interest in something that was different to the norm. Back then, there weren't many South Africans. There was a bit going on in the UK. There wasn't the French market, or the French leagues were a lot of Italian players, a lot of Argentinian players, very few South Africans, Australians, or Kiwis. It wasn't a time like that. So mine was. I left school, joined the Sharks early on, and then spent 8 years there, which were great. And just in the way that the whole package was put together for me, and like I say, my wife was my fiance at the time. Travel experience, being exposed to something different was important.
Yeah.
And like I say, you take a chance, and then it works for you, and you have fun, and you don't look back. And just as sometimes it can go the other way. No, so I'd say it was more an interest and a curiosity as to what else is out there, and what other things you can be exposed to, not just from a rugby side of things, but from a life point of view.
Absolutely. But I mean, the top 14 is a great competition, Shaun. There's so many good players there, and it's quite skillful. Would you regard it as probably the most attractive style of play league in the world, or it's Jolly World?
No, not in terms of attractiveness. I wouldn't. I'd say if I had to sum it up, Super Rugby would be more attractive.
Okay.
Super Rugby would be more attractive. What is different about European competition, let's say, to Super Rugby, is the fact that there's relegation and promotion. And once the stakes are higher, because a club can go down and lose out financially, or a franchise can go up or down and lose out financially, there's a different edge brought to that. For some clubs, some teams, it's about survival. It involves the whole town or the whole city or the whole village. And there's that element that you get in European competition, which you do not get in Super Rugby. So, but with that comes, because the stakes are higher, the pressure is higher, and therefore the limits that you push are higher, which brings things into the way a team approaches things, refereeing and management and things like that. So two different things. Again, you can't compare. It's apples and pears. But it wouldn't lead always to the most attractive rugby. The other thing that's different, again, South Africa and the Northern Hemisphere, is the weather. And there are 3 or 4 months where you are severely limited, where it becomes a lot about the fundamentals, about kicking, about positioning on the field, about set piece. So that's not always the prettiest. Like I say, I'm a forwards and a defense coach. I obviously enjoy that side of things, but it's not always the spectacle like Super Rugby would be, where it's generally good weather, generally pressure-free environment. Teams just want to play and do well and win, and therefore you see things that are nicer on the eye.
No,
but the competitions are great, and the fact, I suppose, what is great this side is the European stuff, where you get France against Ireland, against England, against Wales on consecutive weekend. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting, and I'd say the European Cup would challenge Super Rugby in terms of a spectacle. I would say that's a great competition. The top level Champions Cup, they call it now. It used to be the old Heineken Cup. The Champions Cup now is a top level competition.
It's proper, that one. So then a quick one then. What did you prefer, winning the French Championship or the Heineken Cup?
I'm a foreigner, and it was that foreign aspect which I enjoyed. Like I said, I didn't grow up. The French guys grew up like the Curry Cup of old, or where the national championship was the key. It was great. Like I say, the whole village, the whole town, the whole city gets involved. That obviously is nice. But it was the European one, which was, I think, for a foreigner, as more of an interest. Certainly harder because you're probably playing against better opposition, different opposition all the time. No, for me, it would have been Europe.
Excellent. No, I do enjoy watching it. I think it's fantastic. And just seeing how the guys are trying to get up there on the Pro 14 and get dominance so they can get up into it. I think it's fantastic. It's good.
And they have a great in their setup is there's a double header in the pool phases. There's a double header. So there's one part of the season, generally November, end of November, I think it is, where you play the same team home and away on consecutive weekends.
Sure.
Which is quite rare. Super Rugby doesn't have it. Curry Cup doesn't have it. So you play the same team home and away on consecutive weekends. That's it's quite a challenge. And generally, you've got to adapt. You're playing in different conditions. Let's say your home ground and away ground against the same team. So you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to react. And generally, it's those games that decide the pool. So that's a nice edge to the competition.
Yeah, definitely. Sure. Makes it exciting. Because I think one thing that I know it's been sort of going around and around, especially in South Africa, is talk on the Pro 14. A lot of guys have been giving their opinions. Um, but it almost leaves maybe a bit of a sour taste in some analysis of the coaches where, for example, the Cheetahs might not be in it next year. Kings are in a tough situation because, I mean, talk about money. The Blue Bulls have got money. The Sharks have got money. It's almost a no-brainer for them. Is it the way forward for the teams? And is it, I don't know, almost fair to say, to have the Currie Cup, the top four, going into the Pro 16 after changes to that?
I wouldn't be the best in the best position to be judging what's fair and not fair. That wouldn't be right. What I would say is that the reality of things are that to be financially viable means that you exist or you don't exist.
Yeah.
If that's the starting point, then we've got to accept a lot of things. What is sad, because I love tradition, I love history. What is sad is if things completely change and you move on to something new, that would be sad from a traditionalist point of view, although life is about evolving, life's about moving forward. Yeah. And if it is about existing or not, and I think from the sounds of things, that's the case for a lot of franchises, it certainly is for a lot of clubs in the Northern Hemisphere, then sometimes that's what it takes to move on to the next phase and to go again. So it's interesting times, it's new, it's unprecedented, so we'll see how we go. But I'm with you on that side of things. It would be sad. It would be sad if things wouldn't change that much, that there's no link to the past. That would be, I suppose, unfortunate from a traditionalist point of view.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, the oldest cup competition in the world, obviously being Currie Cup, it's such a good competition. But as you mentioned, things do change. So yeah, let's wait and see. But in terms of team compositions, and we look at obviously South Africa playing against the British and Irish Lions, and you look at the Six Nations, it looks like it's going to be a jolly good contest next year because England seem to be doing well. Ireland, you can never, ever write them off. They're just proper. And Wales, well, geez, Wales they also excellent. I know it's a far fetch from now, but do you think South Africa have home ground advantage, so they should be okay with that one?
Yeah, I think the other thing that we must add to that, because you mentioned those three, the home nations, the three countries, I think what the Lions almost always do well too is that they're able to combine what is different, a different identity, a different nationality, into a unified effort, and generally they're able to add something to that mix. And I think that's what makes the Lions special. I must say, I'm like any South African, I was delighted with the way the World Cup went. A year, 15 months before that, you could see they were building towards something really nice. So I think they're in a great place. It's great to see, despite all the other things going on around, that we're still so competitive. It will be a great contest. In South Africa, you'd like to think that we'd have the edge, but again, time will tell.
Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. And Shaun, as we sort of draw towards an end, are you like to give us a bit insight maybe of Biarritz and some of the goals and objectives you've got for the upcoming season?
Yeah, like I say, the key thing here would be that it's a country, it's a club with a great history, recent history especially. Not so long ago, 15 years ago, it was one of the premier sides in Europe. Like I say, a bit of a fall from grace in the last 10 years, and they've been stuck in second division for the last 5. I think this is the 6th year. New ownership, new model, great project, moving forward quickly. It's dynamic. And with that comes ambition, and with that comes expectation and demand. So I'm going to shout from the rooftops, but it's an ambitious club that want to get back to close to where they were in a hurry. So it would be to have a really good championship, to go all the way, I suppose, be there at the end when it's decision time, be in the final 4 teams playing it out in the semis, to be able to win it and to be able to eventually get promotion. Ideally, it's this year. If it takes another year, then that's fine. We're in a construction phase, in a building phase. But like I say, dynamic club, in a hurry to get back to, I suppose, former glories. And hopefully the work we do and have done over the last few months puts us in a good position for that.
No, that's good, Shaun, and I can see that you're obviously very passionate about what you do, which is obviously blooming essential, and I'm sure that's going to move to the players as well, especially if they Frenchy. I know they can get quite animated, is that right? They can get quite pumped up.
Yeah, like I say, everything is about history. South Africa, if we generalize, we've got a certain kind of profile, the way we go about our work. We're hardworking, we're uncompromising, we never give up. That's linked to our history, fighting for our country, fighting for what we have today. Other countries have different history. The French are built on revolution, the French are built on war, the French are built on resistance. And as a result, there's a lot of emotion that as a general rule, there's a lot of emotion that's part of their makeup. So yes, to answer your question. So everyone's got strengths, everyone's got, if those strengths are excessive, potential weaknesses. I see it as a strength. The French are emotionally volatile, and that's the excessive side of it. But the side that's great is that when that thing is aligned and when everyone's aligned, they're able to do things and upset the, whatever was on the cards. So hopefully we got a bit of that. Like I say, there's a foreign influence in the coaching staff. There's a foreign influence in some of the key players in the team. And it's always the blend that makes that thing that much better. And hopefully that's the case for us this season.
Excellent. And Shaun, when are you guys actually anticipated starting? It's quite soon, isn't it?
Tomorrow night. Tomorrow night's the first game of the comp. Yeah, we got Perpignan at home tomorrow night. So they are favourites. Favourites before COVID, they were the favourites last season. They'd still be favourites this season to go up to win the championship and get promoted. So it'll be a nice test. Test. We're at home tomorrow night for the opening game of the season.
Shaun, wishing you all the best. I'm sure you guys are going to do well. Really going to be backing you, and we'll try to stay as updated as we can to see how you guys are going along. But it's been really nice to chat to you, Shaun.
Brilliant, Ryan. Thank you.
Good to chat to you. Thanks so much, my man.
Thanks, Ryan. All the best.
Go well.
Cheers,
Yes,
bye-bye.